Okay, so now we're back to our sugya. So we're not going to reread everything from yesterday, but we're going to read just the first part in Hilchos Talmud Torah, Hey Tes 2. When does everything we just said in this Perek apply? Rav Muvhak, with your brilliant Rav, you're clear, not brilliant, not in the intellectual sense, you're radiant Rav, illuminating Rav, whatever you want to say. Shalama mimenu rov chachmaso, who you learn the majority of your chachma from. Okay, so that's the Rambam's definition of Rav Muvhak, someone who you learn the majority of your chachma from, and we looked to try to see what that meant. So we couldn't find any other sources in the Rambam. I did look at Kafach, and he doesn't have any footnotes on that. So that's a little bit annoying. So then we looked at the Tur and the Aruch HaShulchan, and we found some other, shitos, but I wanted to actually, I don't know if this happens to you. Sometimes I forget that certain Sfarim exist. Okay. So what I really should have used yesterday, and I just forgot about this. Are you familiar? How many of you are familiar with the Encyclopedia Talmudit? Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So we have, I don't know when they started making these, but it's a work in progress. Like, we haven't finished it yet. And we have some volumes in Yeshiva. We actually don't have volume 26, or at least if it's there, it's not on the shelf. Right. But fortunately, if you go to Turo, then, or if you're an alumnus of Turo, then Turo has it on Bar Ilan. Okay, so if you don't have a Bar Ilan Turo account, I highly recommend signing up. So let me show you where to find it on Bar Ilan on Turo. Can I make this bigger?
What word did you look up?
What word did I look up?
No, aren't they still at Mem?
Yes, but I looked up Kavod Harav.
Ah.
Yeah. So you go to Encyclopedia Talmudit.
Here.
And if you look under Kavod Rabo, volume 26. So in case anyone is looking at this and hasn't used this before, let me just quickly show you how it works, and then we'll go to our area. Then Torah will give you the password. I don't remember anymore, but I just had it on autofill for a long time. Okay, so
when you get a new computer, you're in trouble?
Unless it is in Google Chrome autofill, in which case it'll remember it. Okay, so you have here at the very beginning, there's like a table of contents. So these are all of the concepts covered in here. Kavod Rabo, Mora Rabo, unless these are other entries. No, maybe it's just like a Koseras. Kavod Rabo, Mora Rabo, Chiyuvo Shal Talmid L'chabed Es Rabo, Shalim Do Torah, and Ulira Oso. Then you've got the 6 sections. Now, again, speaking of organization, this is organized, but not as,
It's organized alphabetically.
It's organized alphabetically, and not as clear as the Rambam. So we want to look under, there's no entry for Rav Muvhak. So what I did was I just did Control F, Muvhak, saw that there were 79 instances. So I changed it to Rov Chachmaso, which is really the question we wanted to do. So you'll find that, wait for it. So here is a entry on Rov Chachmaso, okay? So I think this is what we want. And this is basically the better version of what I was trying to tease out of the tour yesterday, because the tour didn't go through every shita. He went through the shitos he went through, but this should go through every shita. And again, I don't want to dwell on this for the whole time. I just want to give you can just, Talmudis volume 26, if you want to say. Okay. Bigdera shel hachachma shehizkir Rabbi Yehuda. So first he quotes, sorry, let me go back a little bit here. Oh, actually, you know what? Sorry. We have to go back a little bit more. Okay, maybe this is okay. Hold on. I actually have to look at the beginning. So he starts off with the Gemara we did yesterday, which we don't need to quote that source again. Okay. Okay, hold on. Low Rabo Shalim Do Mikro Oh yeah, here we go. So he says like this. Here we go. Harav Talmid. Harav shechayavim lechabdo b'chol hakibudim sheyesh l'talmid linhog b'rabo. So the Rav who we are obligated to honor with all these honors that we mentioned for the Talmud to the Rav. V'sheyesh l'talmid lahashiv es avidaso kodem lahashav es avidas aviv, and the whole lost object priority ulahakdimo b'dinim nosafim, and to what do you call to give him precedence with other dinim. Mipnei she'rav hu shemiviu l'chayil hamaba nechlaku bo hatanaim v'rishonim b'datam. Okay, so you have a machlokas tanaim, which we read yesterday, and then you have a machlokus rishonim on understanding the machlokus tanaim. V'chein shenin b'braisa. Rabo sha'amru. So the Rav that they talked about, Rabo shalim de chachma. That's the Rav who taught you chachma al mahusa v'shiura regarding his essence and his shear ayin lahalan. Okay, so it's going to go into that later. V'lo Rabo shalim do mikra mishnah divrei Rabbi Meir, and not the Rav who taught you Mikra and Mishnah, that was Rabbi Meir. So that was number one, which is the Rav who teaches you Chachma, but unqualified, no, not Rov Chachma, so just Chachma, and not the Rav who taught you Mikra and Mishnah. That's Rabbi Meir Shita. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Kosher Rov Chachmaso, Hemeno. All the one who the majority of your Chachma is from, and you see that the Encyclopedia Talmudit interjects with Chachmaso Shel Torah. I wonder where they get that from. Hold on, footnote 184. What's going on? Did it freeze? No. Oh, it just temporarily froze. Why is it? Hold on. Is it just taking a long time to load? Okay. 184. What is Gimel Gazela Vaveda? Really? Wait. Hold on here. Chachmaso Shel Torah, and this is in. So we should look here then. Gazela va'aveda yud beis beis. Okay, let's look at that. So this is a good example, right? No, this is a good example. Watch this. Okay, so this will help you appreciate what I mean, right? So it's in Nizikין, okay, because it's a type of loss. And now look at the sections in Nizikין, okay. Nizke Mamon, Geneva, Gazela Veda, Chovel Mazik, and Rotzeach Shmiras Nefesh. Now, what's this? I know we made this point last year, but this is a good review. So Nizke Mamon or Nizike Mamon, I forgot how you vowelize that, is when your property does damage to other stuff, like Shorsha Nagach es Hapara, right? Okay. Geneva is a worse form of damage. That's when you steal someone's stuff. Gazela is when you rob someone, which is not only stealing their stuff, but it's an attack on their person. Chovel is when it's not an attack on their possessions, it's on their body. And then Rotzeach is when you kill them, right? So right away now, you know that if you're going to look at any damages in Sefer Nizikין, there's conceptual order there. I don't know what Chosh and Mishpat is in terms of like the order there, but like this is just like laid out, nice and smoothly here. So Gazela Veda, what do we say? 12, 12, 2.
Well, I thought it was 2:12.
Oh, I think it's 12, 2. Yeah. Let's see. There you go. Okay, so this is an interesting thing. So Paga ba'avedas rabo ima vedas aviv. If you encountered the lost object of your Rav with the lost object of your father, im haya aviv shafol keneged rabo. We read this earlier when we were doing the sugya, I think, of the priorities. If his father was equal to his Rav, rabo. Sorry. Ima vedas aviv. Im haya aviv shafol. Oh, sorry. This is I forgot that the Al Torah doesn't necessarily have the best girsa for those svarim, so I just want to switch to Mechon Mamre. Nizikין. Okay, here we go. Pagav Vedas Rabo Ima Vedas Aviv Im Haya Aviv Shalkul Keneged Rabo. If your father is equal to your Rav, Shel Aviv Kodemis, then your father's comes first. Im Lav. And if your father's not equal to your Rav, Shel Rabo Kodemis, then your Rav's comes first. V'hu shiye Rabo Muvhak, and this only applies if it's your Rav Muvhak. Shirov Chachmaso Shel Torah Mimenu. So it's very interesting that the Rambam didn't say that in Hilchos Talmud Torah. Now, I think there's a reason why he didn't need to say that in Talmud Torah. Why do you think he just said? I mean, look, the reason why he can get away with saying it is because that's the lashon of Rabbi Meir in the Rabbi Yehuda in the Gemara. Okay, but the question is, why doesn't the Rambam say Rov Chachmaso Shel Torah here? I think it's like an obvious answer that could be arrived at through many ways.
I'm never gonna say, "Oh, Talmud Torah, it's obvious." Isn't it?
Yeah, I think that the context is in Talmud Torah, right? So obviously we're talking about Torah, and especially if you go to let's look at this here. In V'rabo shalim do chachma meviu l'chayil olam haba. Well, what chachma brings you to olam haba? It's chachma Torah. It's not chachma in geometry or chachma in umanus.
According to Rambam, would chachma and philosophy bring you to olam haba?
So chachma and philosophy would be included if it's an area of philosophy that would fall under Ma'aseh Bereshis and Ma'aseh Merkava. Like metaphysics would bring you to olam haba. That would be Torah. That's according to the Rambam. That's part of Pardes, which is part of Talmud. Yeah. So certain types of chachma would apply, but let's say like the Rambam has this category of stuff that he calls like preparatory sciences. Like back then, it was math, logic, harmony, astronomy, which astronomy they viewed as more of a branch of mathematics. So I guess unless you're learning those things in the framework of Torah or in the framework of like science or metaphysics, then that would not be the type of chachma that you honor your Rav from. So let's say like if you had a I don't know, like a geometry professor, or your Rav taught you geometry, right? So that would not be the type of Rav that would fit here. But if let's say, your Rav taught you physics, right? Like there was that period where Rav Pesach gave shir on Einstein's and Infield's evolution of physics. And the goal of that was to both show us ideas in Ma'aseh Bereshis, but also to elucidate the Brisker Derech through through its comparisons to the scientific method. That I think would be in this category. So let's say that was the only shir from a Pesach he went to, then that I'd say brings you into olam haba. Yeah.
I'm just remembering some story here about making it about like half the people were Jews from one particular Budapest high school. And they should expect to remember fondly their math teacher for that high school.
Interesting.
It was just it was sort of like a weird kavod rabbo about that.
That's interesting. I'm trying to look. I wonder what anyone have any ideas what chaf pei vav pei refers to? Sof Perek mem daled, but what would chaf pei vav pei mean? And I assume that this is Rambam because it doesn't say. No, it's not Rambam. Kaftor v'ferach probably. Kaftor v'ferach I think is another sefer. Okay, fine. All right, so we're not going to look there. We're just going to look at the Rambam ones, and he doesn't have any other Rambam sources. Okay, fine. So back to the Encyclopedia Talmudit. So Rov Chachmaso Shel Torah Himenu, Rabbi Yossi Omer Shafilu Lo Hi'ir Es Einav Ela Mishnah Achas. And Rabbi Yossi said, even if he only illuminated your eyes with one Mishnah, Shelimdo Pshat Shel Mishnah Achas. That's different than Rashi. You remember that Rashi that we saw yesterday says He'ir Einav means he explained the reasoning behind it. This is the pshat, which is apparently from a long footnote. Okay, we're not going to look into that. V'yesh mefarshim she'amar lo ba davar chachma chutz mi pshat mishnah. So that was Rashi. Some mefarshim say that this is he told you something in chachma beyond the pshat of the Mishnah. Zehu Rabbo, that's his Rab. Uviyushami amru b'shem Rabbi Meir kosha pasach lo tchila lilmod mikra klomer shehiskil lilmod imo. So Rabbi Meir in Yerushalmi says that anyone who introduced him to learn mikra, meaning to say that he began to learn with him. That's interesting. V'yesh mefarshim shepasach lo tchila b'Talmud. Some say that he was his intro Rebbe in Talmud. Sheher lo derech halimud hayashar lahagos ba. That he taught him the derech halimud, the straight derech halimud to think about it. V'chol ma shehatalmid mosif lekach achar kach me'atzmo, and everything that the Talmud increases afterwards is from himself. Mimasha hoya lo rabbo hu is from what his Rab benefited him. So that's the shita I quoted in the name of Pesach yesterday. That he gave you the derech halimud. Mm-hmm. Who is this? Oops, I didn't mean to click it again. It's going to take a long time to load again, maybe. 192. Ha'amik she'ela l'she'ilta kuflamid. You don't need to write this down. B'divrei Rashi v'sober she'ladato ein machlokos bein talmudim v'afa bavli sover kain ayin siyan. Okay, fine. So that answers my question of was that Rav Pesach's own svara or is that an actual shita? So apparently it's an actual shita. Okay, and then be'elu b'dinei harav nishnasa machlokes zo. So on these dinei harav, this machlokas was taught in Nechleko Rishonim. The Rishonim argue. Yesh sovrim shenechleko hatanaim ezehu harav shekavodo kodem lekavod ahaav. Oh, okay. All right. This is interesting. So in other words, like this, the question is, what is the subject of that machlokas tanaim? So some Rishonim hold that they're arguing only about the case of whose lost object you return first. Okay. Hold on, I just lost my place. Sorry, did I just skip a line? Hold on. Okay, not just lost object. I meant like anytime there's a conflict. So unloading the object, the animal, and saving from captives, etc. Okay, and other things that the Talmud is obligated to honor the Rabbin. Okay. Okay. So what is this? There are those who hold that even Rabbi Yossi, who was the one who says that even a guy who only illuminated your eyes in one Mishnah, meaning that the majority of your chachma is not from him, he's not considered your Rav regarding all areas of kavod, and he does not take precedence over your father regarding the returning of the lost object. Inyan cholek al rabo, and we don't have the halachos about splitting from your Rav on that, misraim alav, and complaining about him, and being critically suspicious of him. All of those only apply to a Rav Muvhak. Cholek al Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yehuda, elel inyan kriya aharav v'kima mipanav, and that the only machlokis that Rabbi Yossi has with Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda is tearing and getting up for the Rav. Shaladato, that according to Rabbi Yossi, lamedim min hakasu shatalmid korea af al rabo she'eno muvhak kera she'eno misache. That according to Rabbi Yossi, even on your Rav, your non-muvhak Rav, you tear a tear that you don't mend. And you get up in his presence as soon as you see him. Umin ha'achronim. So in other words, like this, the machlokis rishonim on that machlokis tanaim is this a machlokis on all matters of kavod? Or is this just a machlokus on the kriya and the kima? Yeah. Umina achronim yeshakasvu b'das rishonim sha'af Rabbi Yehuda model inyan kriya shafil. Okay, I don't want to get into this. All right, this is getting too detailed. I wanted to go to because this is getting into stuff that we haven't read yet about like how to stand for other people. I wanted to go on the Rav Chachmas. Okay, so this is now. Oh yeah, so this is another thing. Begidro shel Chachma Amar Rabbi Meir, regarding the definition of Chachma that Rabbi Meir said when he says that you learn Chachma, Sherabu hu davka zeh shalimdo Chachma, v'lo oso shalimdo Mikra Mishnah, not the one who taught you Mikra Mishnah. Kasvu Rishonim shel Chachma hi ha-Talmud. So Rishonim hold that Chachma is the Talmud, and that is footnote 202, which Rishonim hold that is Rashi and Piskei Harid. Okay, I'm gonna close this now.
Did you just close the meeting?
I closed the did I? No, I didn't. I just closed the extra footnote tab. Shabo Svaras Tamei HaMishnah. This is like what Rashi, this is the Rashi we did yesterday, that it's the Svara of the Tamei HaMishnah. Ulahavin Shalo Yihu HaMishnah Sos. And to understand that how the Mishnayos don't contradict each other. V'tamei Isser v'heter v'chiyu v'pater ukvias ha'halacha. Because the received ideas of Torah Peh and the analysis yotim in a Mishnah hua ikar. That's the essence. And even a Rav who sets you up in the pshat of the halacha in matters of Isser, of emes and yosher, even if he didn't teach you analytically, that's considered the Rav we learn Chachma from. So this is an expanded definition of Chachma. Basically, this would include what we would call a bekiusy Rebbe, because what the Amoraim were doing with the Mishnayos eventually became recorded in Talmud Bavli, right? That was like showing how the Mishnayos and the Brysos don't contradict each other. So a bekiusy Rebbe or an Iyun Rav, or even because he says, because that was what Rashi said, is that Shabo Svaras Tamei HaMishnah Ulahavin Shalo Yu HaMishnayos Sos Rozo.
That'll only be if you say Mishnah refers daf to the Mishnah as opposed to the codified text.
Yeah, I think I suspect that Rashi meant, when Rashi said Mishnah, he meant actual Mishnah, like Rabbi Yehuda Nasi's Mishnah.
But I mean, like, well, isn't he saying that's what the Gemara means? But today that would include the Gemara.
Correct. Yeah. So I'm what I'm clarifying. So here's the categories as I see it, and we can make more categories if need be. I think like someone who is basically like teaching you Talmud Bavli like as an explanation of the Mishnah, which will also include like the Gaonim and Rishonim and Achronim on Talmud Bavli, like basically what we call learning Gemara, right? Either as a bekiusy or as iyun. Okay, I think those are two categories. And then the third thing is teaching you, we saw this yesterday. Someone said, La suki shmaita aliba de hilchasa, basically how to derive halacha from those things, which would be like, the Aruch HaShulchan, or like learning certain mafarshim on the Shulchan Aruch in depth, where they're showing you how the halacha emerges. And then he expands this even to just teaching you the pshat of halacha. Okay, so halacha Rebbe, an iyun Rebbe, or bekiusy Rebbe, I think are like the contemporary categories that we have for like this Rav Muvhak. Okay, but so far, and we're going to read more, but so far this does not extend to mikra, per se. Like let's say like a chumash Rebbe or something like that. Okay, so that's what we have so far, and this is all expanding upon what we mean by Rebbe Meir shita of chachma as opposed to mikra and mishnah. Okay, now, then he says, Bashir ha-chachma she-lamed Rav es-ha-talmido ladas Rabbi Meir. So we're still in Rabbi Meir shita. So what about the shir that the Rav must teach the Talmud according to Rabbi Meir? Nechleku Gaonim v'rishonim. So the Gaonim and the Rishonim disagree. Yesh shekasvu she'eno chashuv rabo ela im kein kol talmudo himeno. Interesting. So I did not think of this yesterday. Yesterday we said the difference between Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda of Chachma versus Rov Chachmaso is we thought that Rov Chachmaso was the more Machmir Shita, in the sense that like your main Rav, not just a Rav who teaches you any Chachma, but this is saying that Rabbi Meir holds all your Chachma has to be from him. V'yesh sovrim shekol shalimdo Chachma afilu im ein Rov hatalmudo himeno chashu. And then the others who hold, like we said yesterday, that even the minority of your chachma from this guy he's still your Rav Muvhak. V'yesh kasvu b'das rishonim shel Rabbi Meir Rabbu hu zeh shepasach lo tchila es derech halimod v'hamidu al derech ha'iyun. Others say, like we just read in the last paragraph, it's the person who gave you the derech. V'ein shayach b'zeh klal shir shel kol o rov, and that's not going to lend itself to kol or rov. So again, that's like what Rav Pesach told me, that whoever gives you the derech halimod, it's not a quantitative thing, it's a qualitative thing of whoever like equipped you to be involved in Talmud. Shachachmas Talmud ein la tichla. There is no the chachma of Talmud is infinite. V'ein harav ela mora derech yashar lahagos ba, and the Rav only teaches you the derech yashar to think in. I have there is a Rambam, I don't know where to find it, but the famous thing about who the Rambam considered his Rebbe to be? Anyone know? So he considered the Rimi Gash to be his Rebbe. Okay, but there's a problem here, okay, which is... I think so, right? Rimi Gash. So I think if you look at the Rimi Gash, so the Rimi Gash died in so the Rimi Gash was Maimon's Rebbe, right? Like the Rambam's father's Rebbe. So he died in 1141, okay, and the Rambam was born in 1138 or 11, I think some say 1135. Yeah. So Rambam was like 3 years old, maybe, when the Rimi Gash died, right? So the Rambam never learned from the Rimi Gash directly, but apparently he considers the fact that he learned from either his father's, teachings of the Rimi Gash's teachings, or from the Rimi Gash's Sfarim. He considered the Rimi Gash his Rebbe, So that shows that, like, I just want to mention that that if it's possible that that's what the Rambam meant when he says that, like, the Rimi Gash like gave him his initial derech, I don't know if that's the case, but if we find that statement, then I'll try to see if I can track it down.
It was like the stories of the Gra where he just memorized everything by the age of 6. So,
I don't think they tell stories like that about the Rambam.
It's like, it's the same thing. There's just the initial spark came from the Rimi Gash.
Yeah, it could be. Okay, Begeder shel Chachma. I think this is the last thing I want to do before we go back to the Rambam. Begeder shel Chachma, she is Rabbi Yehuda. regarding the definition of chachma that Rabbi Yehuda had mentioned, and this is relevant to the Rambam because this is how we paskin, okay, according to the Rambam, Rav Muvhak hu zeh sherov chachmaso himenu, that the Rav Muvhak is the one with the majority of chachma you got from him. Nechleku rishonim, so the rishonim disagree. Yesh sovrim shahadavar tali b'chachmaso shahal talmid. Some, okay, I didn't even think of this possibility. Some hold that it's dependent on the chachma of the talmid. Okay, in other words, the rove of the talmid's chachma. Okay, im chachmaso b'mikra. If the talmid's chachma is in mikra, rabo sherov chachmaso b'mikra himenu hu shechashuv Rav Muvhak. So then the one who you got the majority of your mikra chachma from, that's your Rav Muvhak. V'im mishnah, v'im talmud. Okay, and that I believe was Rashi. Let's see if they quote Rashi for footnote 211. That's Rashi and the Rush, and I don't know who the Nun Yod is. Nimuki Yosef, probably Nimuki Yosef on Bava Metzia. I think there's Nimuki Yosef on Bava Metzia. Okay. All right. So that is one shita. Uladea zo nechelku achronim, and on that shita, the achronim disagree. B'talmid sherov chachmaso b'talmud merav echad, v'rov chachmaso b'mikra merav acher. So that was what we kind of raised implicitly yesterday. Let's say, I'll take my my example. My Rav Muvhak in Talmud is Rav Pesach, but my Rav Muvhak in Mikra is definitely Rabbi Moskowitz. I mean, I guess it depends on if you say is in content or in like particular ideas. Let's just say Rabbi Moskowitz, right? So that's the question. What do I do? Who's my Rav Muvhak? So there you have Machlokes Achronim. Yesh shekasvu shezeh shechachmaso b'talmud mimenu hu bilvad shechashuv rabo. So some say only the one that you got the rov chachma in Talmud from. So in my case, Rav Pesach. Lefisha Talmud balul hu b'mikra u'mishnah, because the Talmud is mixed in with mikra and mishnah. I think that's going to quote Rabbeinu Tam. Let's see. Hold on just a second. Ein Sanhedrin v'Ein Tosfos. Yeah, that's Rabbeinu Tam. Okay. And Shaladat and because according to their opinion, according to them, you can only have one Rav Muvhak. That is according to the Radvaz and the Ramah. That it's impossible to have many Rav Muvhaks. Okay. But the other shita, which is probably the Aruch HaShulchan, others write that it's possible to have many Rav Muvhaks. Rav echad lamad es rov chachmaso b'mikra, v'etel sheni es rov chachmaso b'mishnah, v'chein b'talmud, midrash v'agados, kabbalah v'kiyotza b'zeh, b'shar chachmos haTorah, harihim kulam rabosav hamuvhakim. So then they can all be Rav Muvhak, whoever you learn the majority of your chachma from by subject. And that's the Shach, apparently, is the earlier Achron, and the Zakin Aaron. I don't know who that is. Okay, so that's the other shita. V'yesh mosifim, and others add, Sha'af b'limud haTalmud, afshar shaharbe yechashvu l'rabosav hamuvhakim. So the Aruch HaShulchan said this also. They hold that even in Talmud, you can have different Rav Muvhaks. Let's say you learn by many Rebbeim equally. This is like what Chaim Gersten was asked yesterday about. Let's say like a person is in Rav Pesach shir and Rabbi Feder shir, in Gemara, right? Let's say you learn in Rav Pesach shir 5 days a week and Rabbi Feder shir 4 days a week, right? So what will the din be? But there's neither one. You could say the majority of your chachmas from Shekulam Nechshavim Rabos Muvhakim. All of them are considered your Rav Muvhak. Who says that? Is that the Aruch HaShulchan? That's the Shvile David. Okay, I don't know who that is either. Okay, v'yesh shecholkim al kol zeh. There are those who disagree with all of these. V'sorvim af l'das Rav Yehuda eno chashuv rabo ela zeh shalimdo Talmud kedas Rav Meir sherabo hu zeh shalimdo chachma d'hainu Talmud. Some say that no, all of this is only in Talmud, like Rabbi Meir. Aval hamalavin mikra u'mishnah eno chashuv rabo. But the one who teaches you mikra and mishnah, that's not his rav. Shadavka ha-Talmud maybe l'dei ma'aseh, because davka Talmud brings you to ma'aseh. V'hu derech chaim l'olam haba, and that's the derech chaim for olam haba. Who holds this? 19 and 20. That's the shitos and the ha'amek she'ela. Okay, I regret not knowing these people. Rabbi Yehuda enu cholik im Rabbi Meir ela b'shir ha'chachma shalom himenu k'dei she'yachashvu karaba. Okay, so according to this, I'll summarize in a second. that the only thing that Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Meir disagree about is the quantity of chachma, whether it's rov or chachma stam. Shaladato hadavar talu davka b'rov chachma. So according to Rabbi Yehuda, it's davka rov chachma. V'yeshikasvu shalo dai b'chachma achas bilvad. Some say it's not enough to have one chachma. Rov chachma, so hainu rov kol chachma v'chachma. That's what we thought in the other reading of Rashi yesterday. The majority of each and every chachma. Okay, fine. Okay, so in other words, like this is that let's just take stock here. Okay. See, the good part and the bad part about Encyclopedia Talmudit is it gives you a nice decision tree in terms of all the machlokim, but like you have to know how far in depth you want to go and what you want to get out of it. Yeah.
I think we just when it comes to figure out the wrong shitos, we can just eliminate all the shitos that require the previous statement of Rabbi Meir to make clear Rabbi Yehuda, because Rambam doesn't include that.
I was thinking that, but I think that might depend on this last machlokus that it mentioned about whether you hold that the difference between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Meir is rov versus not rov, or whether you hold it's chachmaso and not mikra mishnah versus like all chachma. Because if you hold the only difference is in rov. See, Rambam didn't specify Mikra and Mishnah. He didn't mention that, except in regards to the Rabbi Yehuda of the Kriya thing. So I don't know if we can discount the previous statements of this. But let's just take stock here. What would be actually? Let's not take stock. Let's say what would we say now, just in light of being exposed to this machloket, all these disagreements. What would we say is the natural way to read the Rambam? Let's go back to the Rambam here. The Rambam said.
Most of something.
Yeah, hold on just a second. And we have the qualification that we read in Hilchos Gazela Vavidah, which is chachmaso shel Torah. Okay, so that it seems like all those Gonim and Rishonim agree with. And then from the way that Encyclopedia Talmudit presented it, and then Meviul L'chayil Olam Haba. So the question is I guess like this: is there? So does the Rambam by chachma mean all chachmas haTorah, or does he mean davka Talmud? And then the other question, yeah. So the way the Encyclopedia Talmudit mentioned it is they said that chachma is davka Talmud because Talmud is balol with everything. But we know that the Rambam doesn't paskin like that, because the Rambam paskins that you need to divide your Talmud Torah into three parts: Mikra, Mishnah, and Talmud. Or Torah B'Ksav, Torah B'Al Peh, and Talmud. So I would say the natural way to read the Rambam. Oh, and then the other question is, according to the Rambam, can you have multiple Rav Muvhaks?
Well, it doesn't seem like any. First, place on the multiple. It doesn't seem like anybody has read rov as just a lot. They've either read
correct, right? You're correct there, right? So I scratched that from yesterday. That it means a lot, right? It does mean majority
or
equipping you, right, with the derech.
Either majority of knowledge or the biggest or the major cause of the knowledge.
Right. Although you know what, I'm just realizing now, the major cause of the knowledge were those shitos on rov or were those shitos on Rabbi Meir? Were those all shitos on Rabbi Meir? Let me just, I don't want to do a control F because I'm afraid where it's going to take me. Hold on. Because I know we read that here. See, the way that the Encyclopedia Talmudit presented that was that that was a shita on Rabbi Meir, and that was in opposition to rov and kol.
Oh, okay.
That wouldn't be a Rabbi Yehuda thing.
Okay, fine.
Yeah. But I don't think anyone brought that, unless someone else mentioned that here. No. Yeah, so the major question we have here, so just to summarize here, according to the Rambam, then I'm inclined to think that Chachmaso does not limit it to Talmud. Okay. But the question is, like, let's say you're starting off and you're learning, and you've only learned Mikra. So your Chumash Rebbe would be your Rav Muvhak. And then let's say you switch to Mishnah, your Mishnah Rebbe would be your Rav Muvhak. And then to Talmud, I think according to the Rambam, if there's only one Talmud Rav Muvhak, then your Rav Muvhak would be the Talmud one. If he allows for many Rav Muvhaks, then it's possible that he would still say like you could have a Torah Peh Rav and a Torah B'Ksav Rav and a Torah, Talmud Rav. Yeah.
Interesting idea. Back into Gazelle Veda, where Torah.
Right.
Torah is one thing. So thinking Gazelle Veda, therefore, he means the Rav who taught you the majority of not the individual piece, but of the whole Torah.
Okay.
But,
well, yeah.
With one qualifier. Maybe he also saying the fact that he includes it there means he doesn't mean here that only versus the father, where it's only one who brought you to Olam Haba. So it's only one who tried to wrote Torah, but he does not mention Torah here, meaning that it could be of any individual piece because you're not comparing to the father.
So let me break down your statement into two responses. Regarding the fact that he just says Torah, I do think I want to double down on my argument that Torah does mean or does encompass all three areas of Torah, because in Perek Aleph,
I was saying Dafka that since it does.
Oh, since it does, then it's all of them.
Since it does, it has to mean all of them.
Yeah. Okay, I would agree with you there. Yeah. Just to support it. This is in Talmud Torah 110. Ad emasai chayav adam lilmod Torah ad yomoso shneimar ufeni siru milavavcha kol yemei chayecha. So until when is a person obligated to learn Torah? Until the day of his death. So there he says Torah, right? Yeah. And this is the first of the halachos that's talking about your chiyuv to learn, which we did, earlier this year. As it says, lest you remove them from your heart all the days of your life. And then chayev l'shalish zman limidaso, and a person is obligated to split his learning time into thirds: shlish b'torah sheb'chsav, shlish b'torah sheb'al-peh, shlish yavim yaskil, achris davar, etc., hu nikra Talmud. So Torah is all three of them, right? So now, what would you say? So we're on the same page there, right? So now the question is, and then one more thing also in the next, not in the next halacha, later on in the paragraph, the Rambam says, that's in the beginning of a person's learning. That when does this triplicate system apply? That's in the beginning of a person's learning. That's when you do thirds. But then once you've done that, and he no longer needs to do Torah B'Ksav or to be constantly involved in Torah B'Al-Peh, so then he should set aside, regular times to review those things so he doesn't forget, but then he should turn all of his time to Talmud Bilvad. So here's the question. Okay, the question is, let's say you do have the case I described before, where you have a main Rav in Talmud and a main Rav in Mikra. Would the Rambam hold that both of those are your Rav Muvhak? Yeah.
They're both your Rav Muvhaks, but neither of them you would override your father for.
Oh, yeah, that's clear. Okay, I mean, it's clear that you don't override your father. That I would agree with. But the question is, does the Rambam hold that it's possible to have two Rav Muvhaks?
I guess here's what I think. Maybe the fact that he excludes the Talmud Torah, the word Torah in Talmud Torah, could that be that maybe he thinks it's possible that he's creates a distinction between the row of Torah and just the row of Chachmasa. As in the one in Talmud Torah is dafka not the row of Torah.
No, I think it is reasonable to assume that it's Chachmasa shel Torah, like I said before, that he doesn't have to spell that out in Talmud Torah because that's the context. And I think that it is the same, but the question though is do we have any evidence about whether the Rav holds that you can have multiple Rav Muvhaks by the three subjects of Torah or not? What do you say? I mean, the straightest reading of the Rambam would be that you only have one Rav Muvhak, so the question is who would be Rav Muvhak? And I'm inclined to say that it's the Rav in Talmud. But the only thing is because the Rambam does hold that is the more that's the highest level of Talmud Torah, as evidenced from the fact that once you graduate from doing the thirds, you do Talmud all day.
I just think it's sort of the person, like maybe for most of you Talmud, let's say you're a genius who if you're taught the Hebrew language,
right, then you can figure out your own.
You just figure it out all your own. In which case, your Rav Shlomo would be your Rav because he's the one who taught you most of it. And then the rest you just figure out your own because you're a genius.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. Yeah, that's the other possibility. Or not the other possibility. That is a possibility that yeah, hold on just a second here. Yeah. See, what I was gonna say is that the straight way to read it is that you only have one Rav Muvhak, because he just says, he speaks of it in the singular, Rabbo Muvhak. Yeah, I think Tzarech Iyun in terms of the Rambam Shita, but I think we did clarify. I think it was helpful to go through all these shitos.
Yeah. I do hear you saying it's just easier to read as one Rav Muvhak.
Yeah, I'm still not decided on the subject matter question.
Yeah, I think if it's one, I don't see why you say Dafka. I guess Rove of Talmud would just be Rove of Torah, whatever that means for you.
Yeah, but yeah, Rove Torah. So let's say what I'm more precisely what I'm clear on and what I'm not clear on. So I agree that it's Rove Torah for you, which see, I don't know about this, because here's the thing: you can make the argument that Talmud is a higher level than Torah Sheba'al Peh, because Talmud is an analysis of Torah Sheba'al Peh, and Talmud is what you devote all your days to at the end. However, Torah Shebiksav and Torah Sheba'al Peh are equal in the Rambam's eyes, in the sense of like both being fundamental. You can't learn Torah Shebiksav without Torah Sheba'al Peh, and vice versa. So what if you had one Torah Sheba'al Peh Rebbe and one Torah Shebiksav Rebbe, and you each learned Rov Chachmas of that from them? So conceptually, it sounds like the Rambam would allow for multiple Rav Muvhaks, but textually, it sounds like he only has one.
As in, you're saying exact half that.
Not exact half. Just like you let's say you're following this Shlish method, right? And you learn, you spend the first 3 hours of your day learning Torah Shebichsav from one Rav, and then you spend the next 3 hours learning Torah Sheba'al Peh from another Rav, and then the next 3 hours learning Torah Talmud from another Rav. So you'd have Rov Chachmas shall Mikra from one, and
I don't think it would just be none of them.
So that's the other possibility. That is the other possibility, is that you would not have Rav Muvhak if you're getting equally. Yeah, that also seems weird though, because I feel, maybe I'm just prejudiced from what we said yesterday, that it feels like there has to be a Rav who embodies the whole kol hacholik al Rabbu kacholik al Shechina, Rav meviu l'chaylam haba, all that other stuff. There has to be one chacham par excellence that receives the highest form of kavod Torah.
Why does everybody have to have that?
I'm not. I don't know. I'm not saying that they have to. I'm saying I'm inclined to think that, because it's from the way he talks about the place that Mora Rabach Kamora Shemayim. So what you're going to say that if you have one main Rav, then you've got a human person who represents your Mora Shemayim. But if you have two Rav Muvhaks, then no one does. It's a little weird to me.
I just think natural. Might be a couple of weird exceptions. Putting aside today's school system, they just assume naturally it will happen. They'll gravitate towards one person who, not whether or not you spend quantitatively amount of years and who just becomes a more defining person.
Yeah,
and then whether then simply put, if that person doesn't exist, if you just. You just go through schools and have different rabbis each year, then it's just. Factually, just imagine going through schools, different rabbis each year. Do you think you would actually have a specific person you could feel he gets?
Correct. Yeah. So I don't. It's a good point that I don't think that person would. I don't think that you would say that you have a Rav Muvhak, right? So that's a good argument for what you were arguing before, that if they're equal, then you just don't have one. That's true.
And there are probably definitely obviously exceptions, but I feel.
Again, unless you go with that shita who holds you, it's subject specific, right?
I think just if a person's learning, you'll know when he has a specific person who he can say he's learning the most from. Right,
and that was what I was trying to argue yesterday. That who your main Rav is, in at least in subject matter, if not in life, But again, I'm inclined to think subject matter, because I experientially. That is how I experience my relationship with my teachers. I have my Rav Muvhak in Talmud, and I have my Rav Muvhak in life. Yeah.
Fine, I get it.
So the question is, what does the Rambam hold? Okay, so I think let's move on from this now. I am going to post the question on some of my Facebook forums to ask if anyone has any insight into the Rambam Shita specifically on whether you can have more than Rav Muvhak.
Maybe I should just ask people like how many people feel like they have one specific person they can say that is the defining person of their Torah.
Yeah, I think that's not going to be a meaningful question because I think that a lot of that depends on circumstances. Like I think, for example, let's say people who were first introduced to learning, let's say they're a Baal Tshuva or they came to learning like, a different style late in life, or whatever, then I think they'll probably feel that way towards that Rav, even if it was a short time,
Okay, I'm saying that could, so what? That could just still be the Rav Muvhak.
Yeah, right. But I'm just saying I don't really see the point in making a poll like that because I think it would just be different opinions. Okay, let's read tomorrow's halachos or halacha. Sorry, we have one more on Rav Muvhak. Okay, this will work out. Okay, so we're on halacha Yod Aleph now. Rav Muvhak. See, sorry. I was going to bring a proof. Oh, see, you can only have one, but that's not true because he's just saying the Rav Muvhak shiratza limfo al kvodo, who wants to be mochel, wants to pardon his kavod or forego his kavod, b'chol hadavarim ha'elu, with all of these things, o be'echad mehen, or with one of them, l'chol talmidav o le'echad mehen, with all of his students or with one of them, harshus biado, he has the right to do so. Look at Rav Makbili, harshus biado, uve hatnaya sha'amar b'makom acher, v'hu shelo yihye b'davar hefsed b'kavod habore. Oh, sorry, let's not look at Rav Makbili yet. We'll go there later. Hold on a second. The alpha pisha machal. And even though he pardoned it, chayev hatamid lahadro vafilo b'shasha machal. The talmid is chayev to glorify him even when he's mochal. Now, I think that glorifying here means what he's going to talk about in the next Perek, because he starts off the next Perek, kol talmid chachamim mitzvah lahadro. Okay, so we're not going to go into that part of this halacha now, but it means basically that the Rav Muvhak can only be mochal his kavod down to the level of where the Talmud treats him like other chachamim. He can't be mochel on like the one that the kavod that's owed to other chachamim. Okay, and you see here it's customizable, right? Like you could, and then with the father we said it's the same thing. That the father can say like, oh, you can sit in my seat, but you still have to stand up for me, So the Rav can say, yeah, like you can sit in my seat, but you still can't use my first name, or like he could say, oh, like my. My Talmud who is my who's my attendant who like helps me out, around the house, he doesn't have to stand up for me, but like my Talmidim in yeshiva do, so you could customize it however you want. Okay, now let's look at this source that Rav Makbili quotes in Sanhedrin 26:6, which I am not familiar with. Sanhedrin 26:6. Oh, the last Perek of Sanhedrin. What is this about? Oh, this is about being Makalel Dayanim. Af al pi sheish l'dayan o l'nasi limchol al kvodo. Even though the dayan and the nasi, a dayan or the nasi or a nasi can forego his kavod. Ein yachol limchol al kilalaso. He can't be mochel the prohibition of cursing him, right? So it's usher to curse any Jew, but it's also it's singled out to curse being usher to curse a dayan or a nasi. Same thing with the other people, the rest of the people. So even though the person who they cursed pardoned the kavod, then you still administer makos to the makalel because he sinned and he became liable. Is this really relevant? Okay, we'll read it anyway, and then we'll go back to Makbili. Someone who was liable for excommunication or for ostracization, and V'ratzu beistin limchol al kvodan v'lo niduhu harshus biadam. Okay, I'm not exactly sure what this case is because we haven't gone to nidui stuff yet, but I think this is what we have to get to. V'hu shelo yihye b'davar hefsed b'kavod habore. So in this, whatever this case is of hifkir bebeistin, and beistin wants to be mochel on their kavod and not excommunicate him, they have the ability, but that is provided that there is no harm to the kavod habore. Like let's say the people are like rebelling against Dinei Torah or against the Dayanim, sorry, and against the Dayanim. So, and basically, in order to, since the people are like getting out of control, then Beis Din needs to strengthen Torah and to punish them according to what they see. So that's what Rav Makbili is saying here. Rav Makbili basically applies this to the Rav Muvhak, that the Rav Muvhak has permission to be mochel his own kavod, but not if it is going to cause harm to kavod habore. Now, I don't know if the Rambam actually holds this, because the Rambam only said this by Beis Din.
Didn't he say it's somewhere else that Rambam Bekius is covered earlier on the Perek? That you can't. Oh, like that if he. I think he said he could, but it would probably cause problems for students.
Yes, did he say that? That does sound familiar. Or did we read it looking out of order on something?
I think it was a stone thing. It was chat.
Ein cholkin. Yeah, you're right. V'chol tamid shemezalzel b'davar mikol kavod. Earlier. V'chol hamonea tamid amil shamsho monea mimeno chesed uporek mimeno yira shemayim. V'chol tamid shemezalzel b'davar mikol kavod ravo gorem l'shinish is talking Israel. Right. So if the Rav withholds from the Talmud the option to serve him, then he's withholding a chesed and he's removing his yira shemayim. That's a good call, right? So the question is, he does use a different lashon, right? Removing from him the yira shemayim does seem to be different than being mafsid kavod habore, but they are related, right? They are related, and that's kind of what I was wondering when.
The second case is this is the Beis Din, so and they say like they cannot make a sense of psak or paskin halacha. That way they'll describe cover, but the inability of a Beis Din to make a psak a certain way because the wrong psak has no bearing on what the ability of an individual person to make bad decisions.
Right. That's essentially what I was bothered by with the Rav Makbili, is that I wouldn't be so quick to make the jump from Sanhedrin and how kavod habore is embodied in their enforcement versus an individual Rav and Talmud. I think that's good. All right, let's stop here for today. And we'll maybe quickly revisit this tomorrow, but then move on to the final halachos in the Perek, hopefully, which we'll finish tomorrow at the end of the week. Okay. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Yep.